Alright, it's time for the video a lot of you have been waiting for. It's the part 2 of the 3-part battery relocation series where I go over more of the components for the battery relocation. Just let's cut to the chase. The first thing I'm going to go over is just the real basic tools you need to install the power wire and some of the resettable circuit fuse that's going to be going in the trunk. And just for the wiring, I'm not going to go over how you're going to hold down your battery. That's going to be independent on how you're going to do your kit. This is going to be a pretty short video because this is going to be the nitty-gritty, the most important part that everybody's looking for. I'm using an impact driver because it makes my life a lot easier. And for the most part, I only used 2 tools and a razor blade. With the impact driver, I use a 10 mil. Well, if you can find your 10 mil, but I use a 10 mil and I use a 12. So with that, let's get started. So for this video, I'm not taking everything out of my trunk. I've got my battery in place already, so I'm just going to leave it there since I still have things kind of organized how I need it, since I have the motor out of the car right now and I have something stored inside the vehicle. But with that said, I'm going to be showing you from where I have the 200 amp resettable fuse, circuit breaker style resettable fuse in the trunk, forward to the positive on the starter motor. From the resettable fuse to your battery itself, you may have a different length of a positive lead. So when it comes to the kits that I'm thinking about making, I'll make a wire and have a somewhat reasonable length. It's going to give a lot of you a couple of options of where and how you're going to mount your battery. If you already have a specific spot and you know the exact length, maybe I can make something a specific length, but I'm going to be making only a couple batches, if any, so we'll kind of see how that goes. But anyways, to get started, let me show you. It's pretty interesting how I mounted this back here. Let me get you a little bit lower so you can actually see my battery. I don't know if you guys can see, but right back here I have a Deca ETX30L battery, and then here is my resettable 200 amp circuit breaker style fuse. So it just runs right here to the positive on my battery, and then through the inside of the car I cut a little hole right here for me to run the positive wire through the inside of the vehicle and eventually under the car for my positive wire. And then I have 2 grounds coming off my battery. One grounds to the frame inside the car near like the underneath of the rear seats. And the other one goes to my driver's side, again, left-hand drive car, but it's gonna be the left-hand side or driver's side for North American, shock tower for the rear shock tower. So I just used 2 grounds on the battery on the rear of the car, just 2 nice solid good quality wires. I use 2 gauge for the grounds just like I use for the battery positive, and then I do grounds up in the front. So now let's move to inside the car so you can see how we begin to run the wires. So moving to into the side of the car, you got your back seat area. I personally like to run the wire beginning in the trunk from the 200 amp resettable circuit breaker down forward to the starter. I find it's easier to route it that way than trying to do the reverse, and so that's exactly what I'm going to show you right now. And I'm going to actually put this positive wire back in the car right now. So let me grab the wire so we can get started. Now, this positive wire that I use to go from that point at the fuse down to the starter motor is a 10-foot run. It's exactly, I want to say it's from 9 feet 10 inches to exactly 10 feet. I do 10 feet because I like to have a little bit of slack. I can always tuck the extra slack in the trunk area. It's easier though to you know, pick up the slack than try to stretch a cable that's too short. You don't want a cable that's too short, rip something, and then end up grounding out your positive on the chassis, possibly causing an electrical fire. So to go ahead and get started, we're going to go ahead, remove the bottom half of the rear seat. Let's throw that aside. And now I'm going to remove the upper seat back. So I'm just going to grab my 12 mil and my impact so I can just Alright, I got that removed. In the top corner, you undo the loop where the seat belt is connected to the seat so you can get this whole seat back out of the way. And now from here, not only can you see, I'm trying to see right here in this area, you can see where I have the first ground for the battery. And then right there, you can see the 2 bolts. And those 2 bolts are the back half of where I've got the circuit breaker mounted. And I have that hole right here, and that's going to be where the wire is going to come through. So I'm going to take the end of my wire that's going to the fuse box. Here's the end of it right here. And put it in place. What I tend to like to do, and I'll show you right now. First thing I do is I loop it behind the body support, this piece over here. It's more of like a chassis reinforcement. I route it behind that and through back into the trunk area. And I'm going to go around real quick and I'm going to tighten it up onto the resettable circuit breaker so that at least that way that's secured. Remember when you're doing this to keep the battery disconnected and the circuit breaker disconnected so that you're not walking around with a live positive wire all around here in the back seat near your fuel tank. All right, and now that I have that taken care of, I'm just gonna reach over here, feed, should have fed it beforehand before I secured it in place, but I'm gonna get this behind the seat belt, and let's see if I can show you. Off here, off to the side, it's a little bit out of frame, or behind the body of the car, but there's the plastic for the back seat. You're going to tuck it inside of there where the rest of that wire loom is, and it's going to pop out right down here near the bottom. So let me just do that real quick. And again, this isn't rocket science, but you just gotta be careful and use your brain a little bit when you're putting this stuff in place. So now that that's down here at the bottom, this is where the utility knife comes in. There is a little plug right here. Let me see if I can show you guys a little bit better. And there's this plug right here. You're going to cut out the inside of it only so that it still protects from the frame of the car and rubbing the wire insulation against the frame. Alternatively, you can buy a rubber grommet in the grommet section of hardware at Lowe's or Home Depot or wherever, but this is just a quick, cheap, easy way of doing it. You just cut the inside out of that. And so I'm going to feed the wire through that hole, and then there's an opening underneath the car. I'll show a different perspective that I'm going to feed that wire out through, and then we'll have it under the car. We'll run it the rest of the way forward. So I'm going to start running that now, and you guys are going to get ready to meet me under the car in just a minute. So unfortunately, friends, this is the point in the video where video is not going to be quite as stable and the quality of the video is not going to be quite as good, because since I'm going to be getting underneath the vehicle, I'm going to be using the GoPro, but hopefully this gives me the extra mobility to show you the underneath and what needs to get done. So I'm starting to feed the wire through here on this side, and underneath the car, and I'll place the phone down so you guys can watch me do it. There is an opening in the frame right, where was I? not even underneath the car to see what I'm doing. Where are you? Right here. Here we go. Here we are. So, let me see. Is that in frame? Can you guys see that? Let's get closer. Yeah, right here. You can see the light coming through the other side. That's going to be from inside the trunk area. So, I'm going to feed the wire from inside underneath the rear seat through that grommet through this hole down here in the frame. So I'll just slowly put a finger through that hole and I'll feel around waiting for that wire to come through. And when it does, I'll catch it. There we go, I can feel it. And I'm just going to carefully get it pulled through the opening. Come on. It can be a little tricky sometimes. Come on. Oh, here we go. Now I'm just going to pull it the rest of the way through. There we go. Come on. Just carefully feed it the whole way. And look at that. We've got a wire through the trunk, through the inside rear of the cabin where the back seat is, and now fed happily underneath the vehicle where we can easily access the starter. Now, because I want to go ahead and get ready to jack up the car in just a second, I'm going to real quick take a moment and button all this up and cover it all back up, and that way we can go back to underneath the car and I don't have to worry about coming back up here. I'm thinking about just leaving a lot of this, me just doing work part in, so you can see how quickly this can be done. Obviously, if you're seeing this, that's exactly what I decided to do. Alright, rear seat's back in place, and we can move to underneath the car. So, let's do it. Let's get back for a second, close, move my floor jack, close. Aren't we doing fabulous? Okay, now, gotta jack up the car. Don't lose your 10 mil. Almost lost the socket right there. Alright, that should be enough. Doesn't need a whole ton of clearance to do what we got to do next. Now, take a look at this. Underneath the car, there's clips where the fuel line and the purge for the fuel tank for fuel vapors goes. You notice there's a nice big open extra loop. That's what we're using. It's tucked up under the frame enough that as much as people worry about it, you'd have to hit something stupid big. Like, your car would be more than totaled for you to hit that line. I'm on my third Rx8. My first and second ones were totaled in accidents. One of them, my L2, L3, L4, were crushed, torn, and bulging when a guy in a Tacoma T-boned me. That had a battery relocation. The second one, very similar incident. Car was totaled, bent frame in the back. Still no damage to the power wires. So, for all intents and purposes, unless you do something really reckless or really dumb and cause serious damage, this is going to be a safe spot to put your stuff. Okay, so let's run those lines real quick. You can see some zip ties, some cut zip ties right here. That's because I took the wire out just so I can show you guys how I do the install. Now, switching a couple sockets around real quick. You'll use zip ties and you'll tie your battery wire right up, and I'll come back, I'll bring the hose back, or the camera back, so you can see what I'm talking about. Check it. You're gonna just kind of zip tie the wire real tucked up under here where it's out of the way. It's gonna come on this far side, and when it comes on this far side, you're gonna have it come around just like those OEMs, and you're gonna pull it up in this 2 gauge. When you set it up, hold on, it's kind of a little weird right now. When you do it just right, this 2 gauge fits right in. Okay, let me get a different angle. I'm not worried about the camera or getting dirty. Oh, knocked you guys over, my bad. Party foul. So, see? Get this right up in place. Bam. Now look. Look how that fit. And we're just going to continue to do that. So that's in place. We're good. We're going to move this wire forward. And we'll run this one up. And we'll get this one through a loop. This one right here. And then we'll move up a little more, get through this loop, move up further, get into this loop, and then this is where the 10 mil will come in. It'll come in real handy. You undo this 10 mil right here that holds on the heat shield. And when you undo the 10 millimeter right here that holds in the heat shield and you pull it down, you're going to tuck that power wire up into this heat shielded area. So, let's see here. You get it across, you get it well moved over into that shield, you know, real tucked back in there, alright? Once you know that it's good, I'm going to pull that heat shield back in place. Grab the 10 millimeter nut, get it right back on there. Here's my impact. And like I said, I'm just going to make sure I push it. It needs to go a little bit further back, it feels like. I'll try to push it a little further back. And get that screwed in there. And now look, we're right here where you got to be to connect to the starter. So your engine wire harness and your battery harness that we modified in part 1 is going to come down right here. It's going to connect to your starter. And this is also going to connect to your starter positive. And right there, you got a complete circuit from your battery forward to your fuse box. And then from there, that bridge that we made, that's going to go forward and it's going to power your electric power steering. So now all your stuff is covered, your battery's in the trunk, you got a new fuse holder for your electric power steering that's hidden away, and you've eliminated all that garbage, ugly harness inside the engine bay. And that's how simple it is. I hope that was helpful in part 2 of the whole battery relocation and showing you how to get that wire ran and where I got the resettable circuit breaker placed, so you guys can get an idea what length of wire you're going to need to go from that point to where you're going to locate your battery. I personally am a fan of using that Deca ETX30L battery. It fits right there in that compartment between the rear seats perfectly, and with some minor modification of that, you have everything completely tucked away. You have full use of your trunk. It's probably, out of all 3-4 different versions of a battery relocation I've done across my 3 RX8s, this is probably my favorite iteration. You will, of course, with that much smaller of a battery, you will need to start it frequently enough so that you don't drain or keep your car on a trickle charger to maintain the battery. Alternatively, you can disconnect it like I do and just have no power to the car at all while I have it stored. I mean, other than that, even when I was running this battery, the same exact battery, last winter, and there were some days where I was starting the car cold start, and it was maybe 32, 34 degrees outside. It fired up every time. With a healthy ignition system, even on a motor that had low compression, it would fire up no problems. So a lot of people, they're like, oh, you need a bigger battery or you need a stronger starter. A healthy ignition will go a long way. So yeah, this was part 2. Part 3, I'm going to be going over all of the grounds more thoroughly. Again, I showed the trunk, so I think that's pretty much covered, but part 3 is going to take a while because we're going to wait to do it when the motor is back in the car, which is sitting behind me right now. But I'll show how I'm doing the grounding. What I'm going to be doing for this relocation is I'm actually going to be using motor mount points as well as the block of the motor, so that way our grounds are going to be hidden. But I'm going to show you exactly where and exactly how on the next video. Till next time, guys. Peace.